Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are rolling along with our player props videos each and every day of these playoff games here. We've got a couple of games, 3 games in the Eastern Conference to look at tonight. 1 game 3 there, Philly, Toronto, and then a couple of game 2 matchups as well. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page to continue to check out each and every one of these game videos we'll bring you during the playoffs, as well as these player props videos as well. And head over to thelines.com. Make sure you check out that props tool for you that we've got up there for you guys. Make sure you're getting the best juice available as you're shopping those lines on NBA player props. And want to head to play.thelines.com. Head over there to see if you can win a $25 Amazon gift card. Just take on that NBA Daily Pick'em Challenge we have there. Get everything right, and we will send you that gift card. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for play props. Nate, let's get into it.
Yeah, how can you not take Kyrie Irving right now, letting the hate of the TD Garden fans fuel him for a second consecutive 39-point outing in the playoffs at Boston. Now, in his last 3 at TD Garden, including 1 regular season game, he's hitting 4.7 triples at 50% in his last 4 against Boston since leaving them. 30.5 points per game, 53, 50, 93 splits. Marcus Smart has not been able to do anything with him. He has a 126 defensive rating in his last 3 against Kyrie. And Boston clearly game planned against Durant and was able to kind of contain him, surprisingly, in game 1. But that left Kyrie on an island. They didn't double him until that last possession, got the ball out of his hands. But they're not going to be able to double him all game, even though they probably should. But he's got counters for everything. And his prop at 28.5 points, I can't imagine he falls below that unless this is a blowout either way. But we expect this to be a dogfight all series. He's plus 230 to be the leading scorer in this series if you expect this trend to continue. Plus 290 to just lead this game in scoring again, backing that up from last game where he had 39. I believe Tatum was the next high man with 31. And there's some juicy options on the triples because – look, Brooklyn needs to space the floor here. They can't keep their 3-point shooters out there. Seth Curry barely played. They don't have Joe Harris. So, like I mentioned, Kyrie hitting 50% from deep. For him to hit 4 triples is plus 115. But for him to do that in a win is plus 350 at FanDuel. And for him to get 32 points, plus 440 at FanDuel. I mean, it's just – I'm not bullish on the Nets necessarily winning this game, but – they're not going to win it without Kyrie and KD basically both being around 30 points. And Kyrie, the matchup is a little bit better for him with those huge wings for Celtics. It's a little tougher for Durant to get going, and Kyrie has had no problem scoring on his former team.
Agreed. I'm already planning on hitting the Kyrie to lead the series plus 230 and for him to lead it in scoring. He's already at 39. He's got an 8-point lead on Jason Tatum. I guess the thinking is KD's going to eat into Kyrie's stats more than Brown is going to eat into Tatum's stats, but Brown had more field goal attempts in game 1 than Tatum did. And Kyrie had 4 less than KD. I think there's still reason to think he's going to continue to be more efficient and be that scorer for them. They didn't even bring a double when KD wasn't on the court to Kyrie for a bit, and it made no sense. So there's got to be some better game planning. But yeah, when they game planned for him and they did double him, he took a step back 28-foot 3-pointer and hit it. So I'm not sure how you game plan for that. But moving on to obviously another Eastern Conference game, but I am going to take Jason Tatum in this one. We were talking either 30.5 points for his points prop or 34.5 points and assists combined over on either of those. I do say you take the points and assists. 34.5 there gets you minus 113 on DraftKings. I just prefer the ability to give him that. He had 8 assists in game 1 with those 31 points. He's just become a lot better of a playmaker, upping his assists per game since the All-Star break from, beforehand about 3.2, now about 5.5 since that time, which is awesome. In his last last 6 versus Brooklyn. About 32 points a game already gets you there. And then, the 4 assists against Brooklyn. But like I said, 8 in this last game. I think you just really like him, as well at home, where he's averaging a few more points as well. Since the All-Star break, he's at about 32 points a game at home. Since January, at the end of January alone as well, just 29.5 points a game there, but also 5.5 assists, where he does dime up a bit more at home. So there's really great reasons to like, Tatum's numbers as a playmaker, how much better and how much more he and Brown both get used with Time Lord, Robert Williams, who's still not playing when he's off the floor. So a lot of reasons to like really either of these guys. Jalen's props are just a little bit high. And I think the 34.5 points and assists for Tatum, when you really expect him to get 30 and 5, that's like the bar basically for what I would say his averages are, and why I think that's the floor for his stats tonight.
Yeah, which is why actually those numbers have gone up since they've opened, and they're 36.5 points assists, but the odds are better. 31.5 points is minus 102 at FanDuel. So yeah, they're up high for Tatum, but he is the main man for Boston in his last 6 playoff games at the Garden, getting 34 points per game, nearly 6 assists per game, playing almost the whole game at 42.5 minutes because Jalen was out last playoffs, but he's had a lot of success against Brooklyn, like you said. And yeah, he talked about how great it was to play in front of a full crowd there in game 1, give them something there. I think we expect the Nets to be out, even better offensively in this game. So both the Jays are going to have to be good. I do like Jaylen Brown's 3 points prop. I think that's not too high. And he struggled. He went 1 for 5, I think, from deep, but he's shooting 48% from 3 in his last 9 regular season without the Time Lord, stepping up a little bit more as a perimeter player. And the Nets they're just not able to guard him. He can bully any of these smaller guards and get his open shot when the Celtics move the ball pretty well.
Yeah.
I talked about in the game video for the Raptors, I like OG Anunoby, who hasn't been a volume scorer during the regular season, but now the Raptors are pretty shorthanded. Trent Jr. Is dealing with an illness. Fred VanVleet is hobbled. Scotty Barnes is out indefinitely, basically with an ankle sprain. So in the first 2 games, OG has a 22.5% usage rate, getting 23 points per game on better than 50%, way better than 50% field goal shooting. And he's done well against Philly, 19 points per game on 52% now in his last 4. The Sixers were not world beaters on defense with a 117 defensive rating those first 2 home games. And Danny Green, who's going to be playing even more now with Matisse Thybulle ruled out, had a 120 individual defensive rating. So OG, again, FanDuel has higher props but better odds than DraftKings. 17.5 points, 27.5 PRA. And I think he's going to have an elevated usage rate in 8 home games since coming back. He's only scoring 14.5 at a 17% usage rate, but you jump that up, and I think he'll get over 18 points here with the Raptors, who have just been much better on offense at home since he came back. He helps facilitate everything, keep it flowing with his ability to beat guys off the dribble, but now he has to finish more because they're short on options.
Yeah, I mean, 17.5 points just feels a little bit low, everything considered what he's already been doing in this series and the fact that they're so shorthanded. You've got to expect a bit more offense from him moving forward, and he's also got to expect a ton more minutes for him, as there's nobody else really right now for them. And obviously he's going to be their best defender on the wing as well, per usual. So there's just going to be plenty of minutes to go around for him in this one. And 17.5 points at minus 105 on FanDuel. I feel good about those odds and that number there. So let's finish off with one of our favorite point guards, Jrue Holiday here. Didn't bring it necessarily in the stats column in game 1, 15 points, 6 boards, 6 assists. But he did have a plus 11. We know what he does on defense as he shut down DeMar, and we know he'll continue to play around the 38 to 40 minutes that he got in game 1 as well throughout the series, and continue to have a decent usage rate as well between he and the big 3, the other 2 guys there. And if Chris Middleton continues to shoot as poorly as he did in game 1, you got to expect even more of a usage for Jrue on terms of scoring. So I still think with Jrue you always consider the ancillary stats. So 31.5 points, rebounds, and assists is minus 115 on FanDuel. I think that's about right. I mean, that's about what he has averaged against Chicago this season as well. If you add it all together, is about 30, 31 and points, rebounds, and assists combined in the 4 that they played in the regular season. But, it is the playoffs, and he's going to continue to get minutes. You don't really trust Grayson Allen in too many important scenarios as well. Pat Connaughton you can get on the floor, but he's not taking Jrue's minutes is the point. So at any rate, Jrue's going to be out there. And I think, you like the points, rebounds, and assists more than even the 18.5 points, because I could see a scenario where he gets, 7, 8 boards very easily, which is why you might consider 4.5 rebounds. It's just not the return on your money there at minus 130 that you would like normally. But the rebounds is one of the main reasons I like him to get the points, rebounds, and assists. So if you wanted to play it as safe as you could, you would just take the boards. I just want to get a little bit better juice there with the points, rebounds, and assists. And I do think he will get at least about 15 there, 15 to 18 points. And then I feel really good about those other stats as well.
Yeah, he's a great peripheral stats guy. I mean, you look at counting the finals now, his last 5 playoff games, 6.2 rebounds and 9.2 assists. And the Bucks, I mean, he might defer in the scoring column, but he'll be setting up Giannis and Middleton, who can have their way with this Bulls defense. And then the Bulls, so bad against his position specifically, gave up the 5th most points per game to point guards. But then in the last 30, when they didn't really have anybody healthy in the backcourt, they allowed 26.5 points per game, along with 9 assists and 6 rebounds on the season. So there should be plenty of stats for Jrue as long as this game stays close. And we expect some positive regression from Milwaukee after they fell off a cliff offensively in the last 3 quarters there in game 1. Yeah, the Nets once again +4 at Boston, now down to +3.5 or 3 some places as they're getting some action for sure. That total went up to 227. It was 224, I believe, in game 1, and now it's at 226. So a little bit higher, still a pretty exploitable total if you like both teams to continue to score. With Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, that is what the Nets do, and they do not get many stops. But the other 2 games that we will break down for you in this episode on this Wednesday night, all Eastern Conference tonight, Josh. We got Sixers -2 at Toronto to follow at 8 p.m. here. That total is at 217. And then the Bulls are +10 again at Milwaukee, total at 225.5. Down from 229 after their last game was just a horrendous offensive showing of the last 3 quarters, at least for the Bucks, and the whole game for the Bulls, as we always expected. I don't think there's going to be a lack of offense, though, in Boston. The Nets, at this point, they know what they have to do to win, and that's they need both of their superstars to have superstar games. And KD did not, and they still almost won because Kyrie went even beyond the margins in terms of his performance, fired up by that TD Garden crowd that continues to egg him on, and he thrives on it. I mean, he had 39 points in a closeout game last May at Boston, 39 points again, shot 12 for 20 from the field, and he's hitting 4.7 threes now in his last 3 trips to TD Garden at a 52% clip. Lots of props that are spicy to take on Kyrie again. We do expect Durant to bounce back, of course, after he went 9 for 24 with 6 turnovers, 23 points, 3 assists. But Kyrie should still get his. I mean, the Nets don't have many third bananas, as Josh loves to talk about the bananas in tow. I mean, their bananas are frankly pretty terrible. I mean, they might have the worst supporting cast outside of Joker in terms of how the pieces fit. There's just not a lot of great options for Steve Nash, who is almost a rookie coach, and his best assistant last year was Ime Udoka. So, I mean,
fair. How
much of an edge is Brooklyn going to have in terms of the X's and O's here? Boston,
I give it to the Celtics. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Boston has a huge edge and a really obvious edge that says, when Brooklyn has to go small, we can just punish them inside. And they did. They had a 43-29 rebounding advantage, 14 offensive rebounds, 18 second chance points, a 54-32 advantage on paint points in game 1. And it could have been worse for Brooklyn. I don't feel I'm being too much of a homer here to say that Brooklyn did benefit from a lot of no calls down the stretch once Kyrie and KD were both in foul trouble, but Kyrie particularly. The Nets, the Celtics were picking on him down low and attacking him in transition. And he would do a lot of really lazy defense where he was flat-footed and just reach. And if you're not a superstar, you just get called for those fouls straight up, whether you get ball or arm or nothing, because it just looks bad. And frankly, they're lucky he didn't pick up a fifth foul or a sixth foul down the stretch. I guess he probably fouled Jason Tatum on that buzzer beater. Well, that's an aside. I mean, that is something to watch, though. I mean, if the Nets' margin for error is just so small that if one of those guys has to sit, they're in big trouble. I mean, the Celtics have 5-7 contributors. The Nets can hope they get a spike game from one of these guards. I mean, Dragic had his spike game in game one without them getting totally exploited on the other end. And Boston, missed a few bunnies, didn't get a free throw advantage. Like I'm saying, they did not get the benefit of that whistle down the stretch. So, I mean, that is all to say that Kyrie is somebody to bet on at 28.5 points here. It's interesting to take him plus 290 to lead this game in scoring again. Interesting to bet on him plus 230 to lead the series in scoring. The Nets, I don't know if they can win this series. There's a lot of moving parts still. I wouldn't really bet the series because Ben Simmons, now cleared for contact, might return around game 5. Rob Williams, on track to maybe return game 5 or 6. So a lot of moving parts, but you can bet just plus 170 for this to go 7 and not pick a winner because that's what everybody wants to see and what everybody expects. I mean, this is an incredible first round series. Neither team seems likely to go home. In this particular game, I just like the Nets over at 111.5 rather than the Celtics, which is 3 or 4 points higher. I mean, in 17 games with KD and Kyrie on the floor, they have a 126 offensive rating, and they shot 54% from the field, 46% from deep as a team in game one, despite, again, KD, who I think you mentioned had only a few games below 40% in his playoff career, having a down game. And because the Celtics dedicated so many resources and so much of the game plan to bottling him up, Kyrie excelled in one-on-one matchups. He's now forced Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, into a 126 defensive rating in 3 consecutive meetings. There's just not much you can do with him. I mean, game plan, what are you in a game plan for? Like, he just instinctually counters whatever you put out there and gets buckets, especially if you're going to egg him on with the Garden. I hope the Garden gives him the silent treatment. Just turns the other side tonight. See how that goes, because they are not helping by any means.
Quit poking the dragon. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the last thing to watch is Boston's struggles in the fourth quarter in close games. That is why we almost went under in game one, because all of a sudden, they can't score. They start looking for those whistles, which didn't come. And they struggle down the stretch. They hadn't been in many close games because they've been crushing teams. So I think we get another close game, and that's why you definitely lean towards Brooklyn covering. Brooklyn as a teaser to +7 with whatever other result you'd like here. Maybe the over with this game. Feel very confident about that, and I think there's no way they score less than 112 in this extremely important game too.
Yeah, no, that adds up. I mean, you could say that both these teams underperformed on offense to a degree. I mean, at least a couple of the stars, I would say. It's interesting. I mean, Jaylen Brown still ended up with 23 points, but those 23 points seemed like he really, really worked for them. He wasn't really making those open bunnies that he usually makes. And call them bunnies, but even those, open, let's say 12 footers after he blows by a guy from the 3-point line, a lot of stuff just wasn't going in for him. And I mean, he continues to attack, which is good, as that's what they need is his downhill ability. I think, 6 free throw attempts is probably around what you expect. Maybe you'd like a couple more for him. If he gets closer to 10, obviously he's now having a much better game for you. But, not necessarily even knocking Jaylen. I mean, then you look at the other side, obviously KD, not a great game. Yeah, I would say it was great defense. I'm not going to go ahead and knock that, but there were a few threes that left him doing the weird thing where he scratches his head and looks up at the scoreboard and is just like, oh, I don't know what happened. And it was like, you just missed an open 3. And he's so not used to it that he looks so confused when it happens. And 1 for 5 from 3. And I would say, only one of those misses was really contested. So, just from watching that game over and over, it was a really, really instant classic, as we know. So yeah, things I like, I do like KD to have a bounce back game. As you mentioned, I did steal a tweet from someone where they said that KD had only shot under 40% 3 other times before this one in a playoff game, and he's played, I don't know, dozens and dozens of playoff games at this point. So that's an incredible feat. And so, I do expect a bounce back game from him. I do kind of like the over again. It does scare me a little bit more because of that slow pace. Like you mentioned, I think Boston does have the ability to maybe play a little bit better on defense in certain areas. Obviously, Kyrie, there's not much you can do with that, but Kyrie and KD combined for 61. Kyrie just did most of the heavy lifting by scoring 39. And I think if you ask yourself, what do they need to do, these two stars, to win this series, it's 60 to 70 points, easy. 60 is kind of the minimum for them in order for them to be considered, a team to win this game. I do think they have, like you were kind of knocking their bench, but the thing is like, despite the fact that it's not full of guys that you depend on consistently in terms of Bruce Brown, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, Nick Claxton, and even Goran at this point, who played 26 and a half minutes, you can expect it's a kind of a numbers game where you expect one, maybe even two of those guys to have a game that's slightly above the margins, as you say. And then you can keep them in the game. So it's almost like a by committee, but I think the coaching advantage is heavily with Boston, to be honest, because Steve Nash, I don't think we'll know what type of coach he is. I think he's a great manager of people. I think the fact that this team still likes each other, and James Harden aside, the fact that this team still likes each other and is still playing together is a testament to his coach, his people skills. I don't think we'll know what type of X's and O's coach he is until he doesn't have the likes of two of the best offensive players in the last 30 years on his team at the exact same time. And two of the greatest ever. Shout out the snub that Kyrie got on the top 75 there. I think Kyrie, I love him to continue what he's doing. I think KD's the one who is likely to have less of an impact when they're on the road and you've got the Kyrie being poked and prodded by these fans, and just not a good idea with him, man. Like, he's really assumed a villain role in a pretty classic way for himself that I think is benefiting him and his play and his team. So I would shut up if I was Boston's fans, but I don't think we expect that to happen. I do like this to go 7. I think plus 170 is great odds right now because I think after Brooklyn might pull out this game, if they don't pull out this game, I still like them to win 2 in a row at home. To be honest, it's not out of the question. And I think that there's a good likelihood that they win this game. And like I told you before we got on air, until I see a huge disparity in this series, or there's a game like game 1, but then Kyrie doesn't do inhumane things on the court that just seem impossible to most people. And then, the Nets lose in an underwhelming offensive way. Then those odds for that game 7 might even get better, but I don't see that happening. I see some form of outcome here where it's either a super close game, you get the points with the dog. If the C's were underdogs by 4 points, I would pick them just because I think every game right now is a pick 'em. And as a result, I think the series to go 7 at plus 170 is only going to go down as we move forward. So I like that bet. I like Kyrie to lead the series in scoring. And I like Brooklyn to cover tonight.
You said inhumane from Kyrie Irving. It made me think of Marv Albert with no regard for human life.
That's how he was playing, right?
Yeah, the numbers are in support of Brooklyn covering as well. They love being the road dog in this spot. 11-6 against the spread this season as road dogs. Also 16-10 as underdogs. And those games, coincidentally, 16-10. I'm sorry, I meant 16-10 to the over as well. Also 11-6 to the over in these division games. It's sort of the more intense the game is going to be, the more they're going to score and know they're going to give up points at the other end. It's pretty fitting that Kyrie and KD, after their offensive performance, were the worst defenders on that final possession, right? KD was just floating around the 3-point line, looking around, and Kyrie caught flat-footed yet again. Could have just stood straight up and made Tatum make a weird bunny, but yet again reached, does everything you're taught not to do. So they're low on energy and not great defenders. And then, I don't mean to knock the Nets role players. I just think the pieces don't necessarily fit in terms of how, crafting a good lineup that's going to be both good at both ends of the floor, right? You can play Bruce Brown, you can play Drummond, and then it's really just about ISO. They had the second lowest assist rate in the playoffs thus far. They had the second lowest number of threes attempted because they couldn't keep Seth Curry on the floor because he can't guard anybody. Same thing with Patty Mills. So it is a lot of tough decisions for Nash in terms of getting that. And I think they just have to trade offense for defense because Boston, I mean, their offensive rating's close to 125 at home in their last 10. They have room to go up here as they continue to exploit those mismatches and other guys that their depth comes to show. They've gone over in 4 of their last 5 playoff games against Brooklyn, but only covered in 1 of those games, including failing to cover last time out. Collapsing down the stretch on offense makes me think you could bet the over before this game starts, but if you see it start to rise, maybe live bet that under down the stretch because it's an intense game, man. It's like the Eastern Conference Finals right now, and I don't think there's going to be a ton of scoring in a close game down the stretch.
That's fair. Well, I mean, there was some pretty good offense. I mean, specifically from Kyrie in that fourth quarter. But I would agree that it's likely to get slower and a bit choppier. So I still get worried because I do think we're going to continue to get 60 combined from those 2 stars on Brooklyn, and I do think that some form of the 2 stars on Boston plus 2 to 3 guys that can put up 20 plus in the supporting cast as well now, between especially like Horford, Smart, and Derek White. I think there's a lot to like there. I think, this is going to go 7. This is going to be a great series. I think I'm kind of realizing that basically the winner of the next round, 2 versus 3 or 7 versus 3, whoever wins this Nets series and then takes on the Bucks in the next series, that's your Eastern Conference champion to me, unless this is just a brutal series where you sleep on Miami because these teams just beat the crap out of each other, right? And then you get to Miami and they're a tough team, and now I'm convincing myself that it's worth money to put money on them for that future, because I'm just looking at Eastern Conference champs right now. Milwaukee's plus 220, so not great value there, although I do think the fact that they will only have 1 tough series before they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, whereas the Celtics or Nets will have had 2 really tough series. The Heat are also probably going to continue to get to kind of walk into that seems unfair. They're going to have to play Philly next. So everyone will have 1 tough series when they get to the conference finals. I don't believe in Philly, I guess is my point, but I'm really just sort of fluctuating between those 3 teams in Boston, I guess 4 really. The winner of this series, and then Milwaukee and Miami, all 3-ish 4 teams really have a shot. There's still good money to good juice available on those teams there. I mean, the Heat at plus 330 right now are looking better, but Boston plus 310 doesn't look bad. If I can just
interject, I mean, you're talking about what I wanted to bet before the playoffs started, which is just Eastern Conference to win the championship. And that is close, is around minus 120 if you can find it. Because all those teams, we just saw Phoenix lost and now Devin Booker's injured. The Warriors, I don't necessarily believe in. I mean, while those teams will be tired, they will also be way more battle tested. The East is so much stronger at the top right now.
Such a great point, and I wish I had followed you on that. I'll take a look at what it is now. It probably went down with the Suns looking a lot less formidable.
I mean, the series is just interesting discrepancy here. At FanDuel, they have Toronto plus 165 to cover by 2.5, so to at least force 6. But for the series to go 6 and not 7 is plus 400. So definitely some value there if that's the way you want to bet it. I'd be very hesitant, though, because of the state of Toronto's roster. I mean, we know Scotty Barnes is probably out for this game as well. Thaddeus Young hobbled, barely made a dent in his return. Gary Trent Jr. had to leave the game with a non-COVID illness in game 2. And Fred VanVleet is just not himself. I mean, he's just dealing with a multitude of injuries. They had to almost shut him down at the end of the regular season. And so if FVV isn't where he's at, I mean, don't the Sixers have the first, second, and fourth best player in this series? And isn't Tyrese Maxey the second best player at this point? Zing for James Harden. But I mean, as of how they're playing right now, sure. But even with a bad James Harden game, after we saw good Harden in game 1, then he goes for 6 assists and 5 turnovers on 3 for 9 shooting. The team pretty much the same splits: 52% from the field, 46% from deep. Still got 30 free throws, with Maxey going for 23, 9, and 8, and efficient shooting. And Embiid doing what we predicted without Barnes, getting 31 points. Now in his last 2 against the Raptors without Scotty Barnes playing, Embiid is 20 for 32 shooting, and he has 67 points. That has led to this being the slowest paced series so far, in terms of Philly knowing what they want to do is just throw it into Embiid, make you adjust, keep him fresh by playing slow. So Toronto's got to counter at home by pushing the pace, and we talk about how their fast break points are so important for them. They've got to try to push it, and at home they had a lot more success offensively since they got OG back around February 1st. Their offensive rating spiked to 120 at home. They averaged 116 points versus 108 on the road. I actually like OG to continue eating in this one here. He has 46 points on 19 for 29 shooting in the first two games because, like we said, Danny Green's playing more minutes. They're not playing Tybal as if, they didn't want to have that weird rug pulled out from under you when all of a sudden he's not in the rotation in Toronto. And Danny Green, while he's been solid and he's a great playoff veteran, this year, 120.5 individual defensive rating thus far. He's 34 years old. He is not really containing OG, who has a multitude of moves and really has become the second option if Van Fleet is not that healthy. Going to see even more usage rate with those other two guys out, Trent and Barnes. So he's at 17.5 points or 27.5 PRA, like that there. But I'm betting the Sixers at this point. Because of the state of this situation. And yeah, the Sixers better on the road this season too, 19-6 straight up when listed as road favorites. And that is their highest rate to the over as well, 17-7-1 this year. So if they get Toronto's trying to push the pace more, if Philly is still able to score whenever they want just by throwing the ball down to Embiid, and they don't have their best defender, even though he hasn't been playing that much, I do like the over here. Toronto's offense was just tanked in game two because of the kind of the unexpected departure of Trent and because they're on the road. And I mentioned that home road split. So as long as they come along, I think we get over 216. And I do like the Sixers at -2. But if you want to use that total and tease it down with another result, we talk about the Nets at +7.5. That feels great. And teasing that with this total at 212, I feel great about that as a combined bet here tonight.
I'm actually just going to hammer the 76ers total as soon, once again, just full transparency, as soon as we are on break here from this episode, because it's at 108.5. And since just everything that I'm looking at that I would care about to indicate how they're going to play on offense tonight screams over. I would have bet it at like 112.5, and I'll look at some alternate lines. But Philly right now, since James Harden came to the team, on the road, their splits they're back about 114.5 points per game on the road since that time. Against Toronto this season, the only time they didn't score more than 109 points was at home. In the two games on the road, they scored 114 in both of those against Toronto. And dating back to last season, 4 of their last 5 against Toronto, they've scored more than 109 points. So there's no Scotty Barnes. And like you said, FEV is hobbled, which, to be honest, only to me hurts the total for Philly if you like the over, because we need him to score to keep this game somewhat close and keep Philly motivated to keep scoring. But I think they're going to be doing it no matter what tonight, to be honest. And what they've done so far in the series is drop 131 followed by 112. And as you mentioned, James Harden hasn't really had a good game yet. That's not fair to say. If you look at his overall output, maybe his point total isn't what you like, and maybe we're not going to see 28 and 9 and 7 James Harden anymore. But we can see 17 and 12 and 4 rebounds James Harden plenty. And I think we'll continue to do that. I think the assists are what he's obviously going for. In the last game, he did look for his shot a little bit more. 3 for 9 from the field. So it's not like he was still putting up a ton of usage. Really it was just about get Embiid the ball. And then after that, James Harden seems perfectly happy. Like I said in the other video about Toronto and Philly, perfectly happy to let Tyrese Maxey cook. And that's maybe he's just tired because he's never really seemed like he was okay giving up the limelight. And it seems like he's totally fine dishing and diming to Tyrese Maxey, who's streaking all over the floor right now. Really amazing young players that we have showing out in the playoffs. It's super fun to watch, especially he and like Jay Poole over in Golden State. But yeah, 2 points is too low. Maybe this is Vegas is like, look, they're playing for their lives, and this is Nick Nurse and Pascal Siakam and OG and a bunch of dogs at home with a bit of an advantage in terms of the way that they played at home and the choppy, gross pace that they probably want to continue to play. Just because at this point if they don't have Fred VanVleet's shooting, that's really why they came out hot in game 2 and made people think maybe this was going to be the series that we thought it was, where Toronto was going to keep things close. But look, man, there's no Scotty Barnes. Precious Achiuwa is out of his league, and there's really nobody there at all to even battle with Embiid or give him problems now. So the 31 points only came because he didn't really need to play very much after they built a commanding lead, in the third quarter. And there's plenty of other guys at this point that can get the ball in the bucket. So I mean, I'm wary of taking his props still. But yeah, I think there's some money to be made here on 108.5 point total for the 76ers.
Yeah, because Tobias Harris has been playing well as well. We didn't really mention that. And Danny Green can knock down open threes in the playoffs, as we know. But Nick Nurse, you mentioned, I mean, when he's lobbying the refs to call fewer fouls for Embiid, things are pretty desperate. I mean, that's almost like that time in the Celtics series last year where he's jumping on the floor to try to force a turnover. It's a bad look, Nick Nurse. And then at the end of the game, Embiid's going over there, patting him on the head, saying like, yeah, nice try. But he has Embiid that is 12 for 14 at the line, to get most of those 67 points in consecutive meetings without Scotty Barnes. The Sixers are scoring 2 points per game more on the road since Harden got involved, and the pace is slightly faster, 1 possession more per game on the road. Like I mentioned, I think Toronto will try to push it a little bit more. So, yeah, I do like the over. I definitely lean towards Sixers here, but it is a desperate Toronto team. It will be a rocking building. And I see why the team total is kind of low, because Toronto at home, right, they held them they won 93-89, I think, one of the last times they faced at home. But then, again, 119-114 the following meeting. Yeah. So I think that was just an off night for Philly scoring the ball. And Embiid is just too unstoppable right now. And the reason Maxey and Harris look so good is because they're catching the Raptors in rotation, because they have no options to deal with Embiid. And they have to double right away, and there's nothing they can do. That just opens up everything for the Sixers, who still could get a big offensive game from Harden. Yeah, if he decides he wants to be aggressive at some point.
Yeah, if he does, and maybe he will, but I think he's a little bit of a wild card in terms of the types of stats that you expect him to get, and so I think I do like the idea of some player performance doubles here, not because I'm worried about that 2-point spread. I feel great about hitting that. I'm still okay with the 108.5 team total for Philly, despite how well Toronto does play at home on defense and at home in general. It's just not the same team right now with people out, and especially Scotty Barnes, which I mean, he's obviously top 3 in Rookie of the Year voting, but you could make the argument for him based on the fact that he does the most for his team. Yeah, you like him number 1. I mean, he does the most different the most types of things for his team that they need, from point guard to center, essentially, right, on both sides of the floor. And so I think that's where you really miss him, is he shows his value in so many different ways, especially, as we say, guarding Embiid. Looking at those player performance doubles real quick, plus 104 for Embiid to get a double-double, and for Philly to win. I do like attacking that, because I don't really want to have to go too far down the rabbit hole of how many points he's going to score. I think you consider Tyrese Maxey again. 20 points in a victory is actually plus 225. Getting more juice there, because that spread is lower than it was in those first 2 games, where you might have been looking at about plus 175 for Maxey to get 20 and a win for Philly. I do like him because I think, I do think James Harden continues to sort of take a backseat in the scoring role, which leads him to being the second scorer. And Tobias, 2A, 2B, however you want to put it. But Maxi's going to get minutes no matter what. He's 20 years old. Even if this game is at 15 points in the middle of the fourth quarter, he's going to be out there because Doc feels comfortable leaving him out there with a bunch of other guys like Niang and company, and not needing Harden and Tobias and Joel on the floor. When he's got Maxey, a like reliable guy like Danny Green and a veteran there, with a couple of those other guys in the front court, yeah, they're fine against the Raptors and this iteration of the Raptors.
I mean, I definitely am not betting the over at this point. I think Milwaukee has shown that while they're a reliable source of overs during the regular season at home, not so much in the playoffs, despite continuing to play at that good pace, 98.5. This is including all of their playoff games last year in the championship season. It's because they had a 106.5 defensive rating in that span and a well below their regular season pace of 112 on offense. So they went 14-9 to the under, and then at home 8-3-1 to the under. I like the Bucks under at 117.5. It's better odds than the Bulls under, which is now 2 points lower at 107.5 and is minus 120. But I have no problem taking that either, or considering an alternate under here at 221.5. But I think it's just a case of the Bucks not really taking this team too seriously because they haven't beaten a Giannis-led lineup since 2017, and they really haven't beaten anybody good all season since Lonzo Ball went down. I mean, the Bulls are just struggling on both ends of the floor, but did manage to devise a scheme to at least contain the Bucks. Yeah, made some adjustments after that bad first quarter, mucked it up, stayed in the game despite DDR shooting 24% from the field. I would rather take the under here than back the spread again, or take one of those team unders, because we don't love 10-point spreads. And the Bulls have shown a real struggle in terms of putting the ball in the basket against top teams, against their division now, 13-3-1 to the under, failing to get over by 14 points per game. And like I said, yeah, the Bucks at playoff time, they'll just shut you down on one end of the floor. So, I mean, with that huge rebounding advantage, not going to be any second chance opportunities for Chicago either. And with Holiday on Levine or Middleton on DeRozan, vice versa, whatever they want to do, they just have really good options to shut down the Bulls. And then they don't need to score 120 to win this game. And like you talked about in the Nets Celtics video, they're going to have to be gearing up for that series and maybe Miami beyond. So that's why they kind of toyed with the Bulls a little bit in game one and just didn't need to keep their foot on the gas pedal the entire game.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, even if things regress up in terms of like efficiencies on offense and points and individual performances, and things regress upward towards the mean, because 6 for 25 for DeMar DeRozan is not the mean. Still managed to squeak out 18 points in just 6 free throws and 6 for 25 from the field. And then on the other side of the ball too, Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday. Chris Middleton was really the biggest non-factor. Jrue Holiday's defense was awesome. He's actually held DeMar DeRozan this year in 5 matchups to 39% shooting. The last 5 that he's played against him, specifically, actually dating back to one game that he was on the Spurs as well, DeMar. So Jrue plays everybody well. We love him. One of the best defensive point guards in the league in the last 20 years or so. And he's been able to really, and he's a big guy too, so he's able to handle and stay with DeMar as well as anybody can. But I still think, even if you get more points in this game from everybody, this went so far under that you still consider, like you said, the defense of Milwaukee overall. Let's say Chris Middleton has 6-7 more points. Jrue Holiday doesn't go, what was it, like 30% from the field, and DeMar DeRozan shoots better than 6 for 25 from the field. I still think you get this game. 117.5 seems like too much for Milwaukee when I think Chicago does want to keep it a little bit choppier. They do want to be able to get open shots in the mid range for DeMar, and then then have him be able to have Levine play off of him. Try to see if Caruso can hit some threes, but he's just not himself either right now. There's not much to like for the Bulls. There's plenty to like for Milwaukee, but I think that the under continuing that trend in this game does feel right. I would consider some live odds here, as I wouldn't be super shocked if Milwaukee and Chicago come out scoring as well. Milwaukee did love to score a lot in the first quarter in the regular season, so I think there's some opportunity to live bet this under after it gets up there in the first half a bit.
Yeah, and to look for some player performance doubles, of course, to juke the odds. Giannis has some pretty terrible odds in terms of still minus 115 for him to score 30 in a win, but that's pretty damn likely when his prop is at 32.5. You can get plus odds for Jrue Holiday to get 20 or 6 rebounds, which isn't bad in my book, against the Bulls team that has had trouble dealing with size at the point guard position or guarding point guard since they lost Lonzo Ball again. The rebounding advantage is just so stark for Milwaukee. A 100-75 advantage the last 2 regular season meetings. Giannis just dominated the paint for 16 boards, getting whatever he wanted in that game 1. And I think the trend continues here. So, I mean, he's minus 145 to get 13 rebounds. If you have somebody who's going to control things that much, just knowing that Vucevic can't do anything to stop him down low. Bucks are going to win this game, yeah, but I don't trust them to take it seriously enough that they're going to cover 10 points. And I think you have to watch how the line unfolds live to consider maybe we get a repeat where the Bucks start hot and then we go under still. It was just such a stark drop off after that first quarter that it's definitely something to monitor.
Well, and the biggest problem for Chicago is even if they go down, they don't shoot threes. And even though they did shoot 27, which was more than the norm for them in this game 1, they only made 7 of them. So yes, shooting a lot of threes is often sometimes it's at least a decent strategy when you're a dog that needs to really be able to outscore their opponent, knowing they can't stop them. And Chicago knows they can't stop Milwaukee. Milwaukee just stopped Milwaukee, to be honest, in this last game, right? So I think if that's what it's going to take for them to come back. If they do go down, they're in bigger trouble than you could imagine. They're going to need to come out super hot on offense in this one. And look, they went 21 of 71 between their big 3 in this last game. Vooch did manage 17 boards, which was great because obviously that means he's down low trying to at least help out on Giannis as best he can and the one boxing him out. But Giannis still had 16 of them as well himself. So there's plenty of. I mean, yeah, maybe you like the points and rebounds for Giannis as well there because of the fact that 16 boards this game, about 15 in his last 3 against Chicago, who's not a good rebounding team. He's got Brook Lopez back in there, so he's just running free and wild. And there's plenty to like with Giannis as well. But still feel pretty good about. I think this one they're going to try to come out and score a lot. Both teams. I think Chicago's just kind of like, well, shit, we got to be able to put up more points and figure that out and be efficient on offense. But I still think that the defense of Milwaukee will prevail enough to keep us in an under at the end of the game here, where we sit at about 225.5 right now. And that is all the time we have for you on this fun Wednesday night slate here. 3 Eastern Conference games we got for you. We also have a player props video for you today, so make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to follow along with us this whole NBA playoff season as we bring you each and every game. Till we see you next. Happy betting.